Why do the gods make kings and queens, if not to protect the ones who can't protect themselves?
Some kings make themselves. Robert did.
He was no true king. He did no justice. Justice. That's what kings are for.
I think A Song of Ice and Fire is a story about justice, and I feel like talking about it. Here's my plan. First, I'm going to look at a scene from the first chapter of the first book, A Game of Thrones, Bran 1, and that chapter is going to provide a framework for analysis. Then I'm going to look at 6 Jon and Dany scenes, and analyze them in the frame of the first Bran scene. I think that made sense. Okay, let's do it. Oh, before I forget, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about the books.
These ones. A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Can a man still be brave if he's afraid?
That is the only time a man can be brave, his father told him. Do you understand why I did it?
He was a wildling, Bran said. They carry off women and sell them to the others.
His lord father smiled. Old man has been telling you stories again. In truth, the man was an oath-breaker, a deserter from the Night's Watch. No man is more dangerous. The deserter knows that his life is forfeit if he is taken, so he will not flinch from any crime, no matter how vile. But you mistake me. The question was not why the man had to die, but why I must do it. Bran had no answer for that.
King Robert has a headsman.
He does, as did the Targaryen kings before him. Yet our way is the older way. The blood of the first men still flows in the veins of the Starks, and we hold to the belief that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you would take a man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. And if you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die. One day, Bran, you will be Robb's bannerman, holding a keep of your own for your brother and your king, and justice will fall to you. When that day comes, you must take no pleasure in the task, but neither must you look away. A ruler who hides behind paid executioners soon forgets what death is. So that's Ned's code of justice, ethics. It's pretty cool, right? And Ned points out this contrast between the Stark and Targaryen approach to justice. Ned points out that the Targaryens used headsmen. But this is the first chapter of the first book, and we don't even know what a Targaryen is yet. So the contrast kind of goes under the radar. All of these guidelines seem to serve a similar purpose. You have to look into the man's eyes, listen to his words, and you have to do the dirty work yourself. There's a consistent effort to connect with the humanity of the person who is meant to be executed. Jon's first dilemma with justice is with Ygritte. Jon is out on a scouting mission with Qhorin Halfhand. They sneak up on a camp of wildlings and kill them, but Jon notices at the last second that one of them is a girl. His hand froze. A girl. "A watcher," said Stone Snake. "A wildling. Finish her." Jon could see fear and fire in her eyes. Blood ran down her white throat from where the point of his dirk had pricked her. One thrust and it's done, he told himself. He was so close he could smell onion on her breath. She is no older than I am. Something about her made him think of Arya, though they looked nothing at all alike. "Will you yield?" he asked, giving the dirk a half-turn. "And if she doesn't?" "I yield." Her words steamed in the cold air. "You're our captive, then." He pulled the dirk away from the soft skin of her throat. "Qhorin said nothing of taking captives," said Stone Snake. It seems like Jon really doesn't want to kill her. He's hoping that she'll yield and fearing that she won't, because he doesn't know what he'll do if she doesn't.
It shows me that he doesn't really consider killing her an option, and it's hard to blame him. I would probably have difficulty sticking a knife in a strange girl's throat, too. Jon holds back from killing her for now,
against the advice of Stone Snake, a veteran ranger of the Watch.
Stone Snake gestured at the long-hafted axe that lay beside her sleeping furs. She was reaching for that when you grabbed her. Give her half a chance and she'll bury it between your eyes. I won't give her half a chance.
Jon seems to accept the responsibility and risk that comes with his decision, perhaps unwisely.
Ygritte goes on to tell Jon the story of Bael the Bard, which I think humanizes them in each other's eyes. Qhorin and the other members return, and they insist that Ygritte has to die. Tell me true. If I fell into the hands of your people and yielded myself, what would it win me? A slower death than elsewise. The big ranger looked to Jon. We have no food to feed her, nor can we spare a man to watch her.
The way before us is perilous enough, lad,
said Squire Dalbridge.
One shout when we need silence, and every man of us is doomed.
Eben drew his dagger. A steel kiss will keep her quiet. Jon's throat was raw. He looked at them all helplessly. She yielded herself to me. Then you must do what needs to be done, Qhorin Halfhand said. You are the blood of Winterfell and a man of the Night's Watch. He looked at the others. Come, brothers, leave it to him. It will go easier for him if we do not watch. All 4 of the Night's Watch men have chimed in, and the order is clear. If Jon can't bring himself to do his duty, he'll consider himself a failure.
His brothers will consider him a failure too, and there's the risk of Ygritte getting them all killed. Then the blood will be on Jon's hands. Nobody will condemn Jon for killing her. In fact, his deed may be celebrated. He will have killed an enemy of the Night's Watch.
He raised Longclaw over his head, both hands tight around the grip. One cut, with all my weight behind it. He could give her a quick, clean death at least. He was his father's son. Wasn't he? Wasn't he? Do it, she urged him after a moment. Bastard, do it. I can't stay brave forever. When the blow did not fall, she turned her head to look at him. Jon lowered his sword. Go, he muttered.
Is this a case of misplaced compassion, or Ned's principle in practice? He looked into her eyes, listened to her words, and could not swing the sword, so perhaps she did not deserve to die. Let me make it clear that I'm not defending Jon. Maybe he should have executed Ygritte, and he needs to learn to become a harder man if he wants to make the world a better place. It's arguable, but I don't think the purpose of Ned's code is necessarily to define the appropriate course of action, or even to guide one towards it. I think the purpose of it might be to guide one towards the proper guide. Your conscience. I think it's to make sure that the execution of a sentence passes through the conscience of the person who passed the sentence. It seems to place individual human life at a higher value than whatever unpleasantness the ruler has to suffer by doing the execution himself. When that cost is too heavy a burden for you, then maybe you are not fit to rule, pass sentences, or swing the swords of justice. Dany's first big dilemma with justice is with Viserys. Her brother is cruel and abusive, but he's still her brother.
You do not understand, sir. My mother died giving me birth, and my father and my brother Rhaegar even before that. I would never have known so much as their names if Viserys had not been there to tell me. He was the only one left. The only one. He is all I have.
Jorah implied that Viserys isn't a true king, and Daenerys defends her brother. She seems to have a sense of family loyalty and attachment to Viserys, if not love.
Viserys picked up the cloak and sniffed at it. This stinks of manure. Perhaps I shall use it as a horse blanket. I had Doria sew it specially for you, she told him, wounded. These are garments fit for a call.
Dany tries her best to protect Viserys by gently nudging him in the right direction. The power dynamic between them has been reversed by Dany's Khaleesi-hood, her new status as a queen among the Dothraki, and it all comes to a head in their sacred city, Vase Dothrak.
He can keep his bloody foal. I'll cut the bastard out and leave it for him. The sword point pushed through her silks and pricked at her navel. Viserys was weeping, she saw. Weeping and laughing, both at the same time. This man who had once been her brother.
Viserys has drawn steel in a sacred place where steel is forbidden, and carved the skin of the Khaal's pregnant queen in front of the Khaal and 5,000 Dothraki riders. If at some point in this scene there was a chance for Viserys to walk out of this hall alive, I think it has all but vanished. From this point on, Dany thinks of Viserys as the man who had once been her brother. Dany has withdrawn from the sense of family duty she described moments before, and Viserys has certainly provided plenty of reasons for it. Dany's handmaiden Jaqi is afraid to translate what Viserys said, but Dany volunteers.
Don't be afraid, she said. I shall tell him. She did not know if she had enough words, yet when she was done, Khal Drogo spoke a few brusque sentences in Dothraki, and she knew he had understood.
Did Dany give a word-for-word account of all the horrible things Viserys said? Or did she try to protect him one last time by omitting the ugly details and injecting courtesy where it might be the difference between life and death? I can't really tell either way, except to watch what happens next.
What did he say? The man who had been her brother asked her, flinching. It had grown so silent in the hall that she could hear the bells in Khal Drogo's hair, chiming softly with each step he took. His blood riders followed him, like 3 copper shadows. Daenerys had gone cold all over. He says you shall have a splendid crown, that men shall tremble to behold. Viserys smiled and lowered his sword. That was the saddest thing. The thing that tore at her afterward. The way he smiled. That was all I wanted, he said. What was promised.
With Dany's translation, she seems to understand that what's about to happen is not good for Viserys, though she doesn't bother to convey Drogo's intent to Viserys. So far, Dany has been a passive bystander to her brother's execution, but does her silence and inaction mean that she's complicit? To what extent do you think Dany is a bystander, or a participant? When the sun of her life reached her, Dany slid an arm around his waist. The Khal said a word, and his blood riders leapt forward. Kotho seized the man who had been her brother by the arms. Hago shattered his wrist with a single sharp twist of his huge hands. Kohallo pulled the sword from his limp fingers. Even now Viserys did not understand.
No, he shouted. You cannot touch me. I am the dragon. The dragon, and I will be crowned.
Whenever Dany thinks of him as the man who had been her brother, it seems like Dany is thinking, he's not my brother anymore. I don't owe him anything. Viserys began to scream the high, wordless scream of the coward facing death. He kicked and twisted, whimpered like a dog, and wept like a child. But the Dothraki held him tight between them. Ser Jorah had made his way to Dany's side. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Turn away, my princess. I beg you."
No. She folded her arms across the swell of her belly protectively. At the last, Viserys looked at her. "Sister, please! Dany, tell them! Make them... Sweet sister!" When the gold was half melted and starting to run, Drogo reached into the flames, snatched out the pot.
"Crown!"
he roared.
"Here, a crown for Cart King!"
And upended the pot, over the head of the man who had been her brother. The sound Viserys Targaryen made when that hideous iron helm covered his face was like nothing human. His feet hammered a frantic beat against the dirt floor, slowed, stopped. Thick globs of molten gold dripped down onto his chest, setting the scarlet silk to smoldering. Yet no drop of blood was spilled. He was no dragon, Dany thought, curiously calm.
Fire cannot kill a dragon.
It's difficult to tell, one way or another, but I dare say Daenerys enjoyed that. And it's hard to fault her, considering how cruel Viserys was.
I'd let his whole Khalasar fuck you, if need be, sweet sister. All 40,000 men. And their horses, too, if that was what it took to get my army. Be grateful it is only Drogo. In time you may even learn to like him. Now dry your eyes. Illyrio is bringing him over, and he will not see you crying.
Since Dany didn't technically or entirely pass the sentence, or swing the sword, and since it isn't clear whether or not she took pleasure in it, Dany has enough plausible deniability that there's nothing to criticize with regards to Ned's code of justice. But still, I don't feel very good about the situation. Surely the method was unnecessarily cruel, but that's just the Dothraki way. Besides, if Dany had insisted on a less agonizing mode of execution, it may have caused unnecessary problems between her and the Dothraki. Dany took the easy road, but it isn't clear to me that she took the wrong or right one. Where Jon Snow shouldered the moral responsibility toward a stranger, Dany avoided the moral responsibility toward a brother. The circumstances are such that Dany and the sympathetic reader can easily defend that Dany was a helpless bystander, that this is not a fair comparison to Jon's situation at all, and that Viserys deserved to suffer anyway. I think I would have honestly handled the situation the same way Dany did.
South of the Wall, the wildlings capture an old man, a northerner, and they order Jon to kill him. No questions asked. It's a test of loyalty to prove that he's no longer a crow, but one of the free folk.
He might have said 1,000 things, or wept, or called upon his gods. No words would save him now, though. Perhaps he knew that. So he held his tongue and looked at Jon in accusation and appeal. You must not balk whatever is asked of you. Ride with them, eat with them, fight with them. But this old man had offered no resistance. He had been unlucky, that was all. Who he was, where he came from, where he meant to go on his sorry sway-backed horse. None of it mattered. He is an old man, Jon told himself. 50, maybe even 60. He lived a longer life than most. The Thenns will kill him anyway. Nothing I say or do will save him. Longclaw seemed heavier than lead in his hand. Too heavy to lift. The man kept staring at him, with eyes as big and black as wells. I will fall into those eyes and drown. The Magnar was looking at him too, and he could almost taste the mistrust.
Jon knows that the man is going to die, whether Jon does the deed or not, because someone else will do it instead. Jon tries to push himself into action, rationalizing that the man is old anyway. He had a good life. But Ned's words are already in effect. Jon is looking into the man's eyes with apprehension.
The man is dead. What matter if it is my hand that slays him? One cut would do it, quick and clean. Longclaw was forged of Valyrian steel, like ice. Jon remembered another killing, the deserter on his knees, his head rolling. The brightness of blood on snow. His father's sword, his father's words, his father's face.
Jon tries to convince himself that, actually, it would be merciful if he did the execution himself, because he knows that he can do it in one cut. Do it, Jon Snow, Ygritte urged. You must. To prove you are no crow, but one of the free folk.
Ygritte seems to have an emotional stake in this. I think she wants to believe that Jon has given up the Night's Watch, and joined her people. And I think Jon knows that if he doesn't kill the man, Ygritte may consider it a betrayal of love.
An old man, sitting by a fire. Orell was sitting by a fire too. You killed him quick enough. The look she gave him then was hard. You meant to kill me too, till you saw I was a woman, and I was asleep. That was different. You were soldiers. Sentries. I and you crows didn't want to be seen. No more'n we do now. It's just the same. Kill him. He turned his back on the man.
No. Ygritte points out the similarities between this situation and the situation when they met. Ygritte attributes Jon's mercy toward her to the fact that she's a girl. It must be her wild red hair and crooked teeth. She accuses him of some kind of hypocrisy, but as it turns out, the thing in Jon that compelled him to mercy toward Ygritte is the same thing that compels him to mercy toward the old man. Not her sex, but his conscience. Unlike the execution of Ygritte, where Jon's companions left him to do the killing in private, now people are watching him. The Night's Watch's job certainly does not include killing small folk. He knows that if he doesn't do the killing, somebody else will do it anyway. He also knows that this is a test of loyalty, and his own life may hang in the balance.
The Magnar moved closer, tall, cold, and dangerous.
I say yes. I command here.
You command Thens, Jon told him, not free folk.
I see no free folk. I see a crow and a crow wife.
I'm no crow wife. Ygritte snatched her knife from its sheath. 3 quick strides, and she yanked the old man's head back by the hair, and opened his throat from ear to ear. Even in death, the man did not cry out. You know nothing, Jon Snow, she shouted at him, and flung the bloody blade at his feet.
Ygritte's denial tells me that she feels betrayed. Despite great immediate risk to his life, Jon remembered Ned's words, and he could not swing the sword. So how is Jon doing? I think he's in line with Ned's code. Jon didn't pass the sentence, so it wouldn't have been right for him to swing the sword. The scene demonstrates a troublesome variation of justice, and how the code survives the transformation. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Or in other words, do not swing the sword for sentences you did not pass. I think it's an indictment of executioners, and the rulers who used them. But Jon's life was at risk, and he could have been killed here. This decision didn't do any favors for his romantic life either. And if Jon were killed for this decision, would that then mean that he did the wrong thing? Daenerys is enjoying the new trader caravan at the market in Vaes Dothrak. She's noticeably pregnant, and Jorah Mormont catches a wine merchant selling her poisoned wine.
You will drink,
Dany said, cold as ice.
Empty the cup, or I will tell them to hold you down, while Ser Jorah pours the whole cask down your throat.
The wine seller shrugged, reached for the cup, and grabbed the cask instead, flinging it at her with both hands.
Take this one away to await the pleasure of the call, he commanded, gesturing at the man on the ground.
The merchant captain places the wine cellar in the custody of Khal Drogo. But I don't find out what happens to him until later. Dany was near tears when they carried her back. The taste in her mouth was one she had known before. Fear. For years she had lived in terror of Viserys, afraid of waking the dragon. This was even worse. It was not just for herself that she feared now, but for her baby. Dany's thoughts reveal that she's more upset about the danger to her baby than to herself. Jorah tells Dany that Robert Baratheon offers lands and lordships for her in Viserys' death.
My brother? Her sob was half a laugh. He does not know yet, does he? The usurper owes Drogo a lordship. This time her laugh was half a sob. She hugged herself protectively. And me, you said? Only me?
You and the child, Ser Jorah said, grim.
No, He cannot have my son."
She would not weep, she decided. She would not shiver with fear. The usurper has woken the dragon now, she told herself. And her eyes went to the dragon's eggs, resting in their nest of dark velvet. The lordship thing is pretty funny, but the inclusion of her unborn baby in the bounty seems to push her over the edge. She hardens her resolve. She tells Jorah to light a fire and sends him away so that she can try something a little crazy. She places her eggs in the fire and watches it for a long time until it burns out. The eggs glow, but that's all, and she's saddened by the result. Dany has just narrowly survived an assassination attempt, and it seems like she's nurturing some kind of revenge fantasy. She wants these old stones to hatch into real living dragons, even though she knows that doesn't make any sense, which I think is why she wanted to try this alone.
This seller of poisons ran from the moon of my life. Better he should run after her. So he will. Jogo, Jorah the Andal, to each of you I say, choose any horse you wish from my herds, and it is yours.
Khal Drogo awards Dany's rescuers, and he passes a strange sentence for the wine cellar. It isn't clear what it means, until the very end. The wine seller hurried behind them, naked, on foot, chained at throat and wrists. His chains were fastened to the halter of Dany's silver. As she rode, he ran after her, barefoot and stumbling. No harm would come to him, so long as he kept up. In retrospect, the fate of the man seems obvious, but it's still kind of vague, at least until 2 books later, when the full truth surfaces in Dany's thoughts. She had dragged the wine cellar behind her horse until there was nothing left of him. So how did Dany do, with regards to Ned Stark's code? Dany is slightly more involved with this execution than the first. Drogo was the one to pass the sentence, and I could easily make the case that Drogo swung the sword too. He tied the man to the horse after all, but Dany rode the horse. She may have set the pace, and as far as I know, she didn't insist upon a less cruel form of execution. To be fair, that objection would have been out of place among the Dothraki. Once again, Dany is shrouded in plausible deniability. I'm shielded from the knowledge of whether or not Dany took pleasure in justice. In no small part because I took pleasure in it on her behalf. Nobody poisons my Daenerys and gets away with it. They're trying to kill her baby. Her emotional state and the social environment are such that her silence on the matter of the execution comes easily. And of course, an excess of suffering is what pregnant queen poisoners deserve anyway. If it were my life and my baby in danger, I could see myself doing exactly what Dany did. In A Dance with Dragons, Jon Snow is Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He gives Janos Slynt command of Castle Greyguard on the Wall, and 30 men, with the assignment to repair the castle for use. But notice Jon's thoughts.
Jon slid the oilcloth down his bastard sword, watching the play of morning light across the ripples, thinking how easily the blade would slide through skin and fat and sinew to part Slynt's ugly head from his body. All of a man's crimes were wiped away when he took the black, and all of his allegiances as well. Yet he found it hard to think of Janos Slynt as a brother. There is blood between us. This man helped slay my father, and did his best to have me killed as well.
The temptation of vengeance is evident in Jon. Janos is fat, ugly, and Jon is loath to call him brother. Janos Slynt helped kill Ned, and he tried to kill Jon too.
Keep your ruin, bastard! I'm giving you a chance, my lord. It is more than you ever gave my father. You mistake me, my lord, Jon said. That was a command, not an offer.
Janos continues to disobey, and he begins insulting Jon, kicking furniture and storming out. Jon's thoughts reveal how he really feels, but so far, those feelings don't seem to have influenced his judgment.
He could only hope that a night's sleep would bring Lord Janos to his senses.
Even after all of that, Jon is still hoping that Janos will come around. He doesn't.
Please take Lord Janos to the wall, and confine him to an ice cell, he might have said. A day or 10 cramped up inside the ice would leave him shivering and feverish and begging for release, Jon did not doubt. And the moment he is out, he and Thorne will begin to plot again. And hang him, Jon finished.
Jon has spent some time in the ice cells himself, so he knows firsthand how torturous they can be.
They had pulled him out this morning, after 4 days in the ice, locked up in a cell 5 by 5 by 5. Too low for him to stand, too tight for him to stretch out on his back. The stewards had long ago discovered that food and meat kept longer in the icy storerooms carved from the base of the wall, but prisoners did not. "You'll die in here, Lord Snow," Sir Alistair had said just before he closed the heavy wooden door, and Jon had believed it.
As a matter of fact, Janos Slynt is the one who sentenced Jon to the ice cell, to suffer while he awaits his hanging.
"Your father died by the sword, but he was high-born, a king's hand. For you, a noose will serve. Sir Alistair, take this turncloak to an ice cell."
How good would it feel to give Janos the same treatment he dealt to me? But Jon is a better man. He forgoes the option to inflict certain suffering upon Janos, because he believes it will be ineffective at reforming the man. The pursuit to minimize unnecessary suffering is a consistent characteristic of Ned and Jon's justice.
"This will go easier if you stay still," Jon Snow promised him. "Move to avoid the cut, and you will still die, but your dying will be uglier. Stretch out your neck, my lord." The pale morning sunlight ran up and down his blade as Jon clasped the hilt of the bastard sword with both hands and raised it high. "If you have any last words, now is the time to speak them," he said, expecting one last curse.
During the execution, Jon seems genuinely committed to minimize Janos's pain. He's listening to Janos's words and giving him the opportunity to speak.
Janos Slynt twisted his neck around to stare up at him.
"Please, my lord, mercy. I'll go. I will.
Jon is doing a magnificent job of resisting the temptation of revenge. But Janos looks up at him and begs for his life, and the temptation of compassion can be just as troublesome.
"No," thought Jon. "You closed that door." Longclaw descended.
So how did Jon do? Jon passed a clear sentence. He looked into his eyes. He listened to his words. He swung the sword. He took no pleasure in the task. He did not look away. He minimized Janos's suffering, and he bore the burden of justice on behalf of everyone else, in a manner that I think will minimally corrupt his conscience in future judgments. I think that was well done from start to finish. After Dany conquers the city of Young Kai, she travels to Meereen, and the great masters of Meereen have left Dany a warning message at every mile.
Worst of all, they had nailed a slave child upon every milepost along the coast from Young Kai. Nailed them up still living, with their entrails hanging out, and one arm always outstretched to point the way to Meereen. Leading her van, Daario had given orders for the children to be taken down before Dany had to see them, but she had countermanded him as soon as she was told. "I will see them," she said. "I will see every one, and count them, and look upon their faces, and I will remember." By the time they came to Meereen, sitting on the salt coast beside her river, the count stood at 163. "I will have this city," Dany pledged to herself once more. The temptation of revenge is building up, 1 mile at a time, and Dany demonstrates her fortitude. She's committed to absorbing the emotional impact of her enemy's crimes.
By the time the 163rd mutilated child is taken down, she seems filled with furious resolve. And I hope the great masters get what's coming to them.
She rode past burned buildings and broken windows, through brick streets where the gutters were choked with the stiff and swollen dead. Cheering slaves lifted blood-stained hands to her as she went by, and called her Mother.
The battle is over, and Dany has won. She rides in glory through her conquered city, through piles of bodies and rubble, as liberated slaves reach out in worship.
In the plaza before the Great Pyramid, the Myronese huddled forlorn. The great masters had looked anything but great in the morning light. Stripped of their jewels and their fringed tokars, they were contemptible, a herd of old men with shriveled balls and spotted skin, and young men with ridiculous hair. Their women were either soft and fleshy or as dry as old sticks, their face paint streaked by tears. "I want your leaders," Dany told them. "Give them up, and the rest of you shall be spared."
Meereen has a strange culture, but Dany's disgust seems a little bit over the top. This is how you think about people who you don't consider people. But they deserve it.
"How many?"
one old woman had asked, sobbing.
"How many must you have to spare us?"
163, she answered. She had them nailed to wooden posts around the plaza, each man pointing to the next. The anger was fierce and hot inside her when she gave the command. It made her feel like an avenging dragon. But later, when she passed the men dying on the posts, when she heard their moans and smelled their bowels and blood, Dany put the glass aside, frowning. It was just. It was. I did it for the children.
163 great masters were crucified in Meereen's plaza on Dany's orders. How many of those masters did Dany meet eye to eye, and listen to their words? How many of the nails did she hammer through their limbs? Is it true that queens are incapable of using a hammer? Or is it that Ned's code of justice doesn't apply to female rulers? Plausible deniability has gone out the window. But still, I may have done the same thing Dany did. Flies are the dead man's revenge. Daario smiled and stroked the center prong of his beard. Corpses breed maggots, and maggots breed flies.
We will rid ourselves of the corpses then, starting with those in the plaza below. Grey Worm, will you see to it?
The queen commands. These ones obey. Best bring sacks as well as shovels, Worm, Brown Ben counseled. Well past ripe, those ones, falling off those poles in bits and pieces, and crawling with...
He knows. So do I.
Dany remembered the horror she had felt when she had seen the Plaza of Punishment in Astapor. I made a horror just as great, but surely they deserved it. Harsh justice is still justice. The bodies of the crucified masters have drawn flies, and it seems like the flies have become bothersome to her grace. Daario notes the cyclical nature of revenge. I kill your cousin. You kill my brother. I kill 2 of your brothers. And around it goes. And I think the blowback from the crucifixions is a lot of what Dany is dealing with in Meereen. Dany seems a little snappy. She doesn't want to hear about the horrors she has wrought in the pursuit of justice. Maybe it's okay to ignore the code every once in a while. I mean, come on. A ruler can't be expected to do all of the executions. A ruler has important things to do, and we can't have her wasting time chopping off each and every head of every criminal. So, I'm sure you've noticed by now. This is what I think is going on. Ned's code of justice, the old way, is at least one of the fundamental premises in play throughout the story. Both Jon and Dany are faced with these challenging situations involving justice. Jon might be demonstrating how justice is done right, and Dany might be an example of how it all goes wrong, in the way that good intentions from a person with a good heart can go wrong. Jon seems to listen to his conscience, even when it would be easier not to. And I think because of that, his conscience doesn't get corrupted. And since it isn't corrupted, he can trust it to guide him along the right path. Daenerys seems to ignore her conscience, especially when it's particularly easy to ignore, and as a result, it corrupts, and she can't trust it anymore to guide her along the right path. When I look back on these events, I can see exactly where Dany's conscience was warning her all along.
That was the saddest thing. The thing that tore at her afterward. The way he smiled. But later, when she passed the men dying on the posts, when she heard their moans and smelled their bowels and blood, Dany put the glass aside, frowning. It was just. It was. I did it for the children.
It's just that nobody taught her these things. Dany didn't have Ned Stark for a moral guide, like Jon did. Her moral guide was Jorah, and Jorah is a shit moral guide.
Each challenge is slightly different than the others.
The premise is being tested. What happens if you pass the sentence, but order someone else to swing the sword? How does that work out for the hero? The principles are being tested in relationship to each other. What are you supposed to do when your superiors order you, in the name of duty, to swing the sword for a sentence that you did not pass? What if you hate the person so much that you can't help but to take pleasure in the task? How important is this part of the code, really?
What's the harm if a ruler takes pleasure in the task of giving bad guys what they deserve?
For one, maybe the purpose of justice isn't to give people what they deserve. How can I know what anybody deserves? I'd have to be omniscient and eternal. A god. Which might be a good reason why I'd want my ruler to believe in God. If he thinks there isn't a god, then who does he think is going to make sure the bad guys get what they deserve? No one? Well, then he has to do it. So I don't think a ruler can give people what they deserve. But maybe, if he's very careful, he can stop the suffering on behalf of society in a way that won't just make everything worse in a different way, or destroy him from the inside out. Which leads me to another idea. A ruler can't escape his own conscience. Do I really believe that Jon Snow took no pleasure in watching the fat ugly head of Janos Slynt roll across the mud? I don't know. I imagine Jon's conscience operates through dialogue with itself, part accused and part accuser. You liked that, didn't you, Lord Snow? Lord Snow. You've wanted to kill him for a long time.
Be quiet.
Just like he killed your father. Just like he tried to kill you. That's why you used the sword over the noose. Admit it. You wanted to feel the miserable life of Janos Slynt thrum up that borrowed sword and into your numb hand.
I'm Prince Aemon the Dragon.
Lady Stark saw you for what you really are, bastard.
I'm the Lord of Winterfell.
Even if you managed to hide it.
My lady mother says you can't ever be the Lord of Winterfell.
For now. A ruler may be able to lie to other people, but he can't escape his own conscience. And no one can criticize you like you can. So maybe what it's showing is that a ruler needs to behave in a way so that his conscience will be able to withstand the savage internal criticisms he wages against himself. Or herself. I noticed there's a part of Ned's code that Dany seems to have discovered all on her own. It's the idea that it's important not to look away from horrible realities, especially ones you're responsible for. You have to face reality, no matter how bad it gets, but it always seems to manifest in some perverse way with Dany. Jorah warned Dany to look away from Viserys' execution, which would normally be bad advice because you aren't supposed to look away. She refused and insisted on watching. Why? Daario tried to remove the dying children on the road to Meereen, Before Dany had to see them, but she insisted on meeting every one. It's almost admirable. It's like she recognizes the value in exposing herself to reality, no matter how horrible, but only insofar as it feels good and righteous to give people what they deserve. In Dany's pursuit to match the cruelty of the slavers and deal them the suffering they deserve, Dany has learned firsthand what it feels like to commit the horrors that her enemies have committed. And as a result, I think her conscience is under siege from internal criticisms that it struggles to withstand. Guys, this seems like a good place to stop. There are some loose threads I'd like to get to. Maybe in a part 2. Let me know if you want a part 2. You can find the art and music down below. Scroll down and hit the like, and then hit the dislike, and then hit the like again. I'm not sure that they do anything, but buttons are fun. Thanks for watching.
I will see them.
These ones obey.